Hello, I'm Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my vlog, where it's both my mission and pleasure to highlight my creative journey and the things that I'm going through in hopes of inspiring you, giving you specific takeaway, all in the hopes that it makes your creative journey just a little bit easier. Now, before I get into it, I would like to take the opportunity to invite you to subscribe if you haven't already. That way you get all the various lessons and episodes that I put out right when I put them out. Thank you if you just did, and thank you if you already were. It truly does mean a lot to me, as I hope it does to you. So, last week, in a lot of ways, could be summarized by creativity, by creatively restless, right? That would be the term I would use to sum up what this past week has been. And I say that because, it's kind of that weird thing, and it always happens after you kind of complete a major project and the in-between time of starting something new. Because you know what you would like to do, at least I do, but it's one of those things of, okay, is this the right decision? I'm about to really commit to something, so let's kind of explore the options, like what's the right path moving forward? What do I want to do? Because we have to be mindful of our time. I'm not saying ultimately that we can't do all the things on our, let's say, bucket list, but you got to start with one and not get overwhelmed. So as many ideas as I might have, I kind of got to take a step back and be like, okay, what's the most viable? What's the one worth going for right here, right now? And so with In Search of Sunrise, which is a script I wrote and shot a proof of concept for, it's a movie that I really want to make, but it's a movie that I've talked about that is beyond my scope, in the sense that I'm going to need funding beyond my own to really make it happen. And so I've been working towards trying to get that funding, but it's not going to be a matter of weeks or months. It could be a year, maybe two. Who knows, right? It's a long play ultimately at this point. Now, there's still work to be done every single week. So, last week I was reaching out to agents and so forth to try to really see if they can represent the movie, and then from there, get it to production companies, and we can really start to kind of just get things rolling. That's going to take some time. Right? And doesn't mean, on my end, I'm going to continue reaching out to more and more people to see if this is of interest to them. But as I said, it's going to take time. And even then, they kind of want to know, because, let's face it, I'm sort of new in this realm. I'm untested in that way, in terms of box office return and so forth. So, people like to have a little bit of verification from other people that, that there's a talent there. And certainly I can lean on to other things that I've done in the past as evidence of that. But in terms of this, there's a very specific kind of way to go about it. Certainly film festivals, script competitions, and so forth. And so one of the things I did last week was I called up these agencies that I was looking towards and said, what's the barometer that you guys are looking at? What are the film festivals that you guys are on the lookout for, what are certain script competitions, or, just anything else, right? Like, what are you guys essentially monitoring? So I made a list of all the answers that I got, and there was definitely a lot of overlap in terms of what they were looking for. And so in addition to just reaching out to various people, I've also kind of, in that sense, am playing the game where I'm submitting to the various places that they look for in terms of that validation as someone having talent. So I've applied to the things that I can, right? Things that are open for submission, and some things from the list will open up in due time. But the good news is a majority of them I already was actually applied to, and then just a couple of newer ones here and there that I applied to, right? And so we'll see, but a lot of these things that I applied to, whether film festivals, script competitions, and so forth, they have deadlines of some of them like June, right? So that doesn't mean they're not going to like start a selection process until June, and then the event itself, let's say, won't be till the fall or something like that. So it's definitely a long play, and that's all well and good, and that's part of the process. And I want to have patience with that process, because I think to tell this story in the way that I want, I think it deserves that shot and that ability. And certainly, this whole process has pushed me out of my comfort zone to do these things, and to start to familiarize myself with this part of the creative process, because it is part of it, even though it's not like, quote unquote creative, like of like me writing a script, let's say. But nonetheless, it's part of the business, and so you can approach this process with creativity. That's why, like for me, I said, what? Let me just ask people of like what they're looking for, and part of it was an exercise in, just reaching out. So getting comfortable with a little bit of uncomfortability of just kind of being like, hey, what do you guys look for, right? Because it wasn't really about familiarizing myself with, it's not like they'll remember me in that way or whatever. It was just more about A, getting the answer, and B, essentially asking that question, which ultimately wasn't a hard question. But still, it takes effort and getting out of a certain comfort level that I've been in before, right? Because I don't, usually with my projects, I just kind of get to make them. And that's been a huge blessing, right? But again, as I said, to get to this next level and do this particular movie in the way that I want, I really have to step into that new level and try these things, right? And so the reason why I say I've been creatively restless is because, this, as I said, I'm going to have that patience, but I'm thinking about what to work on next. And I've been outlining an audio drama that I want to make, but I also, I don't know, there's just this splinter in my mind that just keeps, hammering this idea that I want to make a movie, this year. That would be great. And so I've been thinking about, what's, if not Sunrise, what's the next movie that I want to make? And through this whole process, it was kind of interesting. The whole week, this kind of question has been bugging me, and I've been thinking about it and just been eating away at me. And, this weekend, I kind of came up with two ideas. One, like a magic realism story with a little bit of jumping off point in terms of a Greek myth about friendships, Damon and Pythias, I believe is how you pronounce his name. If you want to look up that story. Again, it's just a jumping off point, but something like that. And then I had another one about just kind of more based in reality and kind of, I don't, not really about an existential crisis, but let's just say kind of like thinking about life and the meaning of life. And, that sounds rather pretentious and boring, but I'm being vague in terms of what it is overall. And it's like, okay, both are of interest to me, but which one? And I got, in terms of an outline, it's not like the outline's fully complete for either, but I have the major stuff for both. And so I've been kind of trying to get some feedback from various friends of like, what sounds more appealing to you, engaging their interest. And it seems like, based on how I want to do it and when I want to do it, that the existential crisis one appeals to more people, right? And it's one of those things that ultimately, it's not like it has like the end-all be-all hook or anything of that nature. It's not like, it's a story that like in terms of a log line has been told many times before, but that doesn't negate it. And I think, we look at stories, like I love movies that can tell an honest story about humanity and keep it simple, and that's what makes you connect to the story. for example, there's a movie that I saw, Together, it's called. And it stars Ed Helms and Patty Harrison. And it's basically just the two of them. It's about, it's about a guy in his 40s that isn't married, and he wants to be a father. So he gets a surrogate. And Patty Harrison is the surrogate. And it's kind of, their relationship during all of this. And it's a very fascinating movie. Like, not much happens, and yet it's so wonderful. It just pulls at your heartstrings in the right ways. It makes you laugh in the right places. It's just a wonderful, wonderful movie. But in terms of a log line, it's not that different, let's say. I mean, I can't say I've seen a movie about a single man who wants to be a surrogate. That is definitely an interesting viewpoint into it. But nonetheless, like, it has just, it's very bare bones in terms of, it's just, here's life as lived, right? And the beauty is in the way that it's told. And I really love that. And so that, I think that's what ultimately, even though the magic realism one has a better hook, I think people, in terms of that I've been talking to, are much more gravitate towards just the facts of life story, if you will. And so I think that's something that I'm like 99.9% committed to that story now, and I'm going to kind of really work on that. And, it's a story that I know I can film for relatively cheap. I've kind of talked to a few people in terms of actors, and said, hey, would this be a journey that you'd be willing to go on with me, much like with my first movie? Gotten some initial good responses. And so that's exciting, now I got to really write it and then present it to them and kind of go from there. But yeah, it's fun. For me, it's fun, like, to create based on, what I know at my disposal, right? It's almost in a way easier to write when you have restrictions. I mean, people will say that, the more restrictions you have, the more creative you have to be. And so, obviously finances is a big restriction. At this, picking a location. Once I know the location, then I can write based around the location. Once I know the actors, I can write based on them, and also to that, we're kind of keeping it very minimal in terms of people, because also I'm not going to be able to have the crew that I need, right? Or as one would have on a larger or even indie production of like a sound person and so forth. And so for me, I got to try to limit scenes to 2 to 3 people, really. And anytime there's more than that, it's got to really make sense for the story and really be driven. So these are all the things that go into it. And so it forces you to really think of how to approach this. And that's been a fun process. And yeah, I think I have the story that I want to tell. As I said, it's overall fleshed out, but I'm gonna have to really work on it. And yeah, hopefully, if fingers crossed, it's something that I would get to film in November, if not sooner. And I think it's very doable, and I think this one will be a lot of fun, and I'll talk about more of the details in due time as things solidify. But yeah, that was kind of a big one. And the other thing last week that I worked on creatively was I worked with Alzheimer's LA, and it's an organization that a couple of my friends have been involved with over the years, and they need to film some stuff. And so, they invited me to basically film and edit for it. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Obviously, it's a good cause. I like working with them very much so. And so, we filmed this past week. And, now I have to kind of organize it, edit it, and so forth. And yeah, I think it'll really be worthwhile. I can't say too much quite yet, but in due time, obviously it'll be for public consumption. So when the time comes, I'll share the links to that and so forth. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I want to kind of say, because I think it's important to also utilize your talents for something beyond yourself, right? Like, it's great to be creative for your own stuff and with your friends and so forth, but it's equally as needed to also, use your talents for nonprofits that are meaningful to you. And I don't personally have a connection to Alzheimer's in the way of, like, I can't say like X, Y, and Z person I know or someone suffers from it, but I know a lot of friends that whose families suffer from it, and it's a cause worth fighting for, worth kind of bringing to the forefront and lending my talents to. So yeah, I was absolutely on board. For you, it doesn't have to be Alzheimer's. It can be something that's more near and dear to your heart. It's, people often talk about this, like which charity or cause should someone take up, and it's like, just take up anyone, right? There's so many things in this world that could use all of our help that you can't really make a wrong decision, right? So in that sense, this came my way, so I was like, yeah, let's do it, right? Anyway, so that's kind of overall in terms of the creative stuff, what's been going on this past week. Definitely a lot of stuff kind of in the backdrop, in terms of our country and so forth, that definitely has had a lot of weight. Certainly like the Derek Chauvin trial and the verdict there, that was a nail biter, even in a lot of ways, even though it obviously it shouldn't be, and yet in spite of that small little bit of respite that comes with the verdict, right after to see another, in this case a child, a 15-year-old girl, be shot by the police and murdered, died, there continues to be all these different things, and so whenever I talk about the creative aspects of all the things that I'm working on, I try to highlight these things, but I think both things can be true, and I talk about that in a lesson of mine where two things can be true, where it's exciting for me to be able to get to do this stuff, but that doesn't mean I'm putting blinders on in terms of what's happening in the rest of the world. And I don't think you should either, because in order to be an artist, you kind of have to be aware of the world, and your art is as much affecting our world as it is a response to our world. At least that's how I view it, in terms of me, and so for what that's worth. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to tune in and listen to me. I hope it has been of benefit. As always, if you have any questions or thoughts of your own, please share them down below in the comments section, or hit me up on social media at Svitek. I appreciate you and hope to see you next time.